I'm John Lorden.
And I'm Danielle Hallen.
We're here to tell you about our new podcast, Crime After Crime.
John and I started by reviewing true crime cases on our YouTube channels and are using our experience from there to come together and go head-to-head on Crime After Crime.
Each episode is based on a specific topic. Danielle and I research our cases individually, present them to you, and let you choose who the episode's winner is.
Upcoming topics include the sleepwalking defense, best heist costume, and craziest getaway. We also have a YouTube version of every episode available. Just search on YouTube for Crime After Crime and remember to subscribe when you find us.
After you listen to the episode, vote online to tell us who the winner is and who will have the right to use the exclusive Crime After Crime coffee mug on the following episode.
New episodes are released monthly with limited advertising thanks to our amazing supporters at Patreon.
Remember to search for Crime After Crime wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
See you on Crime After Crime.
You're listening to Scene of the Crime, brought to you by AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to check out some of the other great true crime podcasts from this network, including The Murder in My Family, Missing Persons, and 3 Men and a Mystery. All of these podcasts are available for you to binge on right now, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Years after the double murder of Roger and Rose, there was something of a break in the case. In January 1993, an investigation was begun into Floyd Hatcher after the FBI got a call from Hatcher's ex-girlfriend, Beth Banks, implicating him. She called the Kansas City FBI field office, saying Floyd had threatened her with, quote, what he did to Roger. He also said, when the two were arguing, quote, you don't know shit, you don't know about Roger, and grinned menacingly at her. This was a few months after the two had broken off their short relationship in fall of 1992. According to Beth, Floyd got drunk, came over, and made these incriminating statements. Now, this is hardly a confession, and Beth told the FBI that Floyd never specifically said that he killed Roger. But it was enough that investigators decided to start poking around, interviewing some witnesses and re-interviewing others to see whether there was anything to this allegation. DCI files show that Floyd Hatcher was, quote, regarded as a suspect in this case. This could be because there was also something else that made Floyd look guilty. The DCI uncovered that Floyd had been arrested after the murders sometime in late 1980 or early 1981. And St. Joseph police officer Michael Strong reported that when he arrested Floyd on the domestic dispute and drunk driving charges, and Floyd was riding in the squad car, Floyd had cried and said to Officer Strong, quote, if you only knew what I know about the homicides. Officer Strong interpreted this to mean the homicides in Iowa because it was shortly after the murders of Roger and Rose, and he was aware of Floyd's connection to Roger Atkinson. So this is now 2 people who witnessed Floyd Hatcher mouthing off about the murders and seemingly implying that he knew something about them. Let's take a look at Floyd. At the time Roger was murdered, Floyd was married to Marcella's mother, Nellie Hale Hatcher. They divorced in 1981, in large part because at the time Floyd was an admitted alcoholic and also engaged in a series of infidelities. Together, Nellie and Floyd owned the Beacons Moving and Storage branch in St. Joseph. Floyd was a bit of a man about town. He was involved in a lot of other people's business and was, or had been, a Buchanan County Reserve Sheriff deputy. He owned lots of guns, a .357 caliber, a .25 automatic, a 12-gauge shotgun, a .38 Smith & Wesson, and a .22 rifle. Here is Elizabeth Atkinson.
Floyd Hatcher had an in with the St. Joe Police Department because he somehow worked part-time. He had a private investigator license and all that, thought he was big stuff.
Floyd was, at the time of the murders, a very heavy drinker and also engaged in multiple extramarital affairs, as we shall see shortly. After the allegations made by Beth Banks in her call to the FBI, special agents from the DCI, as well as Sheriff Jim Slockett, interviewed Floyd Hatcher in January 1993. He said he last saw Roger when Roger borrowed his lawnmower before he departed for Cahokia. Floyd told the investigators that he considered Roger a close friend. Roger, he said, was well liked by everyone and got along with everyone. He said he was unaware of any problems in Roger's marriage to his daughter, and he was also not aware of any problems in Roger's life, other than what he heard from Marcella. Marcella told him that Roger was up for a promotion at GTE, and this had caused some problems with more senior employees. Floyd specifically gave them the name of Gary S., the colleague of Roger's at GTE, whom we have already discussed. He also advised that DCI should look into a guy named Ricky Cowden, who was an alcoholic and, according to Floyd, quote, has a different disposition when intoxicated. We will discuss Ricky Cowden a little more in a bit. And Floyd Hatcher also had some accusatory things to say about Mike H., whom we have also already discussed. He wasn't able to provide any information as to why he felt this way, but he told investigators that he believed Mike H. might have had something to do with the murders. And as we've seen, investigators also re-interviewed Mike H. in connection with this 1993 investigation of the case. So Floyd threw out the names of a bunch of other people who he thought investigators should look at. Was he genuinely trying to be helpful, or was he deflecting blame? Because plenty of other people were pointing the finger at him. And this was not just Beth Banks, who investigators were told by others was a jilted girlfriend who had a bit of a beef with Floyd. Floyd denied ever saying anything to Beth Banks about what he had done to Roger. He said Beth had tried to come between him and another girlfriend of his, Vicky Seward, by telling Vicky that Floyd was having an affair with Beth. He said that if there was a rumor that he said anything to the effect of, "I killed Roger," someone obviously did not like him. As listeners might have noted, Floyd had a long string of girlfriends, some of whom overlapped, and some of whom overlapped with his marriage to Nellie. And these women had interesting things to say about Floyd. Floyd had been dating a woman named Vicky Seward since 1976 and also had been seeing a Sharon Lohmeyer. Sharon told investigators that she always felt that Floyd was responsible for Roger's death. This was because she said Floyd could be violent and she believed him capable of murder. She characterized him as creepy. She told investigators that when she had lived with Floyd, remember, this was after the murders, he got drunk and angry and broke every window in the house with his fists. He was subsequently arrested for this domestic dispute. She stated she telephoned the police on him at least 4 times. Floyd, she said, had a severe drinking problem and had threatened her life on more than one occasion. He didn't threaten her with a weapon, but he would get drunk and make insinuations that something bad would happen to her. But Sharon didn't think Floyd had killed Roger just because he had violent tendencies. In direct contradiction to what Floyd told investigators, Sharon said that Marcella told her that, quote, he never liked Roger. In fact, Marcella said the same thing to us.
I didn't ever feel like he really liked Roger a lot. There's been different people comment saying, oh, he said he really cared for him and really liked him. It was a son he never got to raise, just kind of stuff like that. But I just never felt that they were close.
Further, Sharon said that Floyd constantly brought up Roger's murder, which concerned her once she learned that Floyd actually disliked Roger. Another paramour of Floyd's, Beth Banks, who had called the FBI on Floyd, told investigators as well that Marcella had told her that Roger and Floyd didn't really like one another and hardly spoke. Here is Detective Fisher.
Floyd Hatcher like I said, I don't know. He was drunk that day we talked to him, but I told him his son-in-law had been murdered. It didn't faze him.
As for Vicky Seward, she told investigators that she and Floyd were in a relationship that had been going on for 7 years at the time of the murders. She said that when Roger was killed, Floyd went off the deep end. He drank very heavily and had a Jekyll and Hyde personality that resulted in him being abusive to Vicky and her children. To investigators, this sounded suspiciously like a man with a guilty conscience. What would be Floyd's motive for offing his son-in-law? Floyd told investigators in 1993 that Roger did not smoke, swear, or drink. But what about cheating on his wife? Did Floyd know that his son-in-law was running around on Floyd's daughter, Marcella, whom he called Pumpkin, even though she was an adult woman? The thinking among investigators seemed to be that perhaps Floyd avenged his daughter Marcella, who was being cuckolded by her husband, by killing her cheating spouse and his lover. In order for this theory to have legs, they had to show that Floyd knew that Roger was having an affair. And Floyd told them repeatedly at the time he had not known that Roger was having an affair. And Nellie Hatcher told investigators that she did not believe Floyd knew. And to quote DCI notes that the entire family was caught by surprise when he was found with another female. But this was not what investigators were told by others. Floyd's ex, Sharon Lohmeyer, said that Floyd had often commented on the murders and told her numerous times how close he was to Roger and how he considered him the son that he never had. He knew that Roger was cheating on Marcella and that Marcella did not know. Vicky Seward told investigators of an incident that occurred about 7 to 10 days before the murders. She and Floyd had been eating breakfast at the Holiday Inn located in the eastern outskirts of St. Joseph when Floyd commented that the van parked in the parking lot was that of his son-in-law, Roger Atkinson. Floyd told Vicky that he hoped that Roger wasn't out messing around, and then told Vicky that Roger had a girlfriend up north, referring to the area where Rose lived. He not only was aware of the affair, but of where Roger's girlfriend lived. So Floyd knew that Roger was cheating on his beloved Pumpkin, and Floyd came to be considered a suspect in the case in part because Marcella, his daughter, who was distraught, confused, and anguished over the brutal murder of her husband and his paramour at a random hotel in another state, named him to her friends and confidants repeatedly. To be clear, she did not say, "My father murdered Roger," but she expressed concern to multiple people that she feared her father could have done it. She believed him capable of the act, and as we shall see, he didn't have much of an alibi.
The rumors have always thought it was my dad.
Marcella told Paul Holes that she still has suspicions today about her father's involvement, and if he did something to Roger, he was not doing her a favor. Margie Lowry told us,
Marcy, she thought her father or her uncle.
And Larry Atkinson also had his suspicions.
Floyd Hatcher was a real hothead. I'm sure she went crying to her dad what was a possibility, and that's when she came down and told her that she feared she would never see Roger alive again.
Cheryl Fountain, who was Marcella's high school friend and matron of honor, told investigators that Marcella had asked Cheryl if she felt her father was capable of murdering Roger. Remember, Cheryl knew Floyd well because her ex-husband, Ricky Cowden, was tight with him. Cheryl said that she had no idea, but she personally could not understand why Floyd would kill his son-in-law over his extramarital affairs when Floyd was doing the same thing. Beth Banks also told investigators that Marcella had worried aloud as to whether Floyd might have killed Roger and said that she always believed he had something to do with the murders. Rita H. also told investigators that she wondered whether Marcella had perhaps vented to her parents about her concerns about Roger, and maybe Floyd got mad and hired somebody. Sharon Lohmeyer also recalled Marcella informing her that she suspected her father of having killed Roger or having someone else do it for him. She recalled Marcella informing her that she suspected Floyd of knowing more than what he had related to police, or possibly being involved in his death. Marcella indicated to Sharon that she wanted to know, but she was afraid of finding out the truth. As for Marcella's feelings now, she seems to remain uncertain. She says in the days after the murders,
I just thought my dad was acting odd. Now, I know people will act differently and odd in circumstances like that, but it was just, especially when we went to view the body for the first time, before we went, my dad said, "Now don't cry." And I was like, what? You would why wouldn't he expect me to cry after what I'd been through and what I was going through? But I didn't. He said, "Don't cry," and I didn't. So I just thought that was an odd statement. When my dad was in the nursing home, I tried to open up the subject of the murders and see if he would say anything about if he knew anything or if he had anything to do with it. But he never did. He never did say anything to me that would even indicate that he had anything to do with it. There has been people say that he's made comments about that, but he never, ever said anything to me about it.
But Marcella acknowledged that she had a concern that
the only thing that I would say that would be a motive for him would be if he thought Roger was mistreating me or doing me wrong, then I could see that as possibly a motive for my dad.
The statements of the witnesses we just discussed raise the possibility, one also endorsed by members of Roger's family, that Floyd was complicit in the murders, even if he was not the one who actually carried them out. Rita H., Roger's sister, said that Larry Atkinson, as well as Betty Atkinson Smith, another sister of theirs, suspected that it was possible that Floyd Hatcher had gotten mad about Roger's philandering and had hired someone to take Roger out. If so, she did not believe that Marcella would have known. Larry and Elizabeth Atkinson continue to believe that Floyd may have had Roger killed. We've addressed the fact that Floyd may have wanted to avenge Roger wronging his daughter. But there were also indications in the DCI files that they uncovered that at the time of the murders, there may have been a significant amount of money missing from the moving business that Floyd operated with his wife, Nellie. One woman named Pat, who was a childhood friend of one of Roger's sisters and who was also friends with Rose's sister Margie, told investigators that Marcella had told her that there was $20,000 to $40,000 missing from the moving business owned and operated by Nellie and Floyd Hatcher at the time of the homicides of Rose and Roger. Marcella confirms to us that she had heard this, but Nellie Hatcher denied it in an interview with the DCI. It may have been just a rumor, or Nellie could have been covering something up. Floyd, too, was asked whether he was aware that the moving business he owned with Nellie, Beacons, was missing money around the time of Roger's death. He passed the buck, saying he did not handle the finances at all. Nellie did. As far as we know, investigators were not able to determine what was really going on with the missing money. What this money could have been used for is anyone's guess, but it is a strange coincidence. Could a payment have been made to someone for some nefarious purpose? Roger's family wonders.
If they were paid by Floyd Hatcher, that's a good motive.
And to top that off, a cousin of the Hatcher family has told the Atkinsons that Floyd preferred to have his dirty work done by someone else.
We knew that there were 2 chairs pulled up by the bed. We knew that 2 people had to be involved. We just can't figure out where Mike fit in because it seems like the people that we heard were involved and could have possibly done the murders were cousins of the Hatcher family, and that Floyd had the money to pay him.
This same cousin grew up around the Hatcher family and heard repeated reference to a machete that had been hidden for some reason. Years later, this machete was given away. In his conversation with the DCI, Floyd admitted to owning a machete and, in fact, owning several large knives. Interestingly, the DCI asked Floyd if he owned any military machetes, and he told him that he owned one, but it had disappeared from his garage. His wife Nellie told investigators that Floyd owned what she termed a corn knife. When asked if this was a souvenir-type knife, she advised negatively, stating that it was more of an Army surplus-type weapon. She described it more as a, quote, corn or cane cutting knife, similar to a machete. When asked to describe the knife, she stated it was an Army surplus large knife with a sheath, approximately 24 inches in length, with a 3-inch blade and a rounded tip. She estimated the blade length to be at or about 20 inches. This knife was sold off at a garage sale, and she did not know the identity of the buyer. Marcella told investigators that her father had always had 2 machetes, and that Floyd had told her that one of his 2 machetes was missing. So the million-dollar question, of course, is whether Floyd had an alibi for the night of the murders. And by the time Floyd was interviewed, he could not recall where he was that night. He told investigators that he believes that he was home. He was not on the road for Beacons that weekend. He wasn't even sure whether he worked on the 12th. He told investigators that he was drinking heavily back then and does not remember a lot of things. Nellie wasn't interviewed in depth for several years either. When she finally sat down with investigators, she told them that she was certain that Floyd was at home with her on the night of the murders. On Friday, September 12th, he worked in and around the office, and then on Friday evening, she did not recall specifically, but speculated they remained home watching television. She said that Floyd was around on the Saturday as well. She then advised the reporting agent that if he wanted Roger dead, he would have done it himself rather than hiring someone, and she knew this was impossible because he was at home that weekend. Nellie tried to find time cards that showed that Floyd was in St. Joseph working that weekend, but she expressed concern to some confidants that she could not verify this with 100% certainty. Sharon Lohmeyer, who told police that she was friends with Nellie, even though she was also seeing Floyd, said that Nellie had told her that she believed that Floyd was home with her that weekend, but she had gone back to find the old trucking records to see if she could find something proving this. To Sharon, this meant that Nellie had concerns about Floyd's complicity in the murders. Marcella said that the most she learned about Floyd's whereabouts from her mother was that he had been working in St. Joseph and was not out on the road that weekend, as he often was in his capacity as an owner of Beacons Moving and Storage. But Rita H. said that she recalled Marcella crying and saying she was not sure where Floyd was that night. Here is Marcella.
I had asked my mom when she was alive several times if she was sure that my dad was with her, and she wasn't too convincing that he was with her.
Floyd submitted voluntarily to finger and palm printing. He also submitted to a polygraph examination at the St. Joseph Police Station on November 15, 1983. This was conducted at the request of the Iowa County Sheriff's Department. It lasted 1 hour and 15 minutes. It says, quote, "The purpose of the examination was to determine if Mr. Hatcher was involved in the double homicide of Rose Burkert and Roger Atkinson, which occurred in September 1980. 13 questions were asked in order to establish patterns. 3 of the questions were relevant. They were, did you inflict the injuries to Rose Burkert and or Roger Atkinson in their hotel room in September of 1980? During September of 1980, did you cause the injuries of Rose Burkert and or Roger Atkinson in their hotel room? Did you cause the injuries which resulted in the deaths of Rose Burkert and or Roger Atkinson? A second test, called a peak of tension test, was performed to determine whether Floyd had knowledge of a word that had been written on the door in the bathroom where the victims were found. The word was believed to have been written by the suspects and has not been publicized. Mr. Hatcher was asked the follow-up question 8 times with the following words inserted into the blank. The question was, do you know if the word blank was written on the doors or walls of the hotel room? A series of words was inserted into the blank that included help, kill, damn, murder, and this. The results of the poly are stated at the conclusion of the report. Quote, Mr. Hatcher answered no to all the questions on both tests. Mr. Hatcher showed no consistent significant reactions, and it is my opinion that he was truthful in his answers. So that settles that, right? Although polygraphs are inadmissible in court, back in the 90s when this took place, investigators tended to put merit in their results. But Beth Banks, who had called the FBI on Floyd, had something to say about this. She told investigators that she had to submit to a lie detector test for work, and she had expressed anxiety about this to Floyd. He told her not to worry about it. He would get her some diazepam or Valium. He told her these drugs would allow her to take the test no problem, especially if she was unused to them because, quote, they really tranquilize you. It's worth noting that after Roger's murder, Floyd authorized the St. Joseph Police to announce that he and Nellie were offering a $2,000 reward, quote, for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the person or persons responsible for the death of their son-in-law, Roger E. Atkinson. But in a testament to Floyd's violent impulses, he told the DCI that he had other ideas. He said, quote, I had in my mind that I was going to shoot him if I ever found out who did it. Floyd Hatcher is now deceased. His daughter Marcella told us that she tried to address the murders with him in his last few months, but he did not divulge any information if he had any. But he remains a strong suspect in the case. We have heard that he was in fact the prime suspect in the eyes of several of the investigators. Here is Tammy Berkman.
I think it goes back to Marcella's dad, the sheriff, and the other guy that works with him. Wasn't really a deputy, I don't think, but like a detective guy. And who they thought it was, because that's what, not the sheriff, but the other guy told me all that. And he said, you know, you're never going to know all the details. You just are going to have to accept that, you know, Floyd did this. He was mad because his little girl was getting hurt because Roger wanted to leave her for Rose. And, you know, he just went on and on and on about it. And he said, you're just going to have to accept that that's what happened.
One of Floyd's associates that police looked at was Ricky Cowden. This was a name that Floyd had given them, and also a name that came up when investigators spoke to the Hatcher family cousin who had heard about Floyd perhaps using hired hitmen and the missing machete. Ricky's father, Jack Cowden, who had died, was best friends with Floyd. Ricky's mother, Hazel, remarried to a guy named Elmer Hale, who was Nellie Hatcher's brother. So Ricky was related to the Hatchers by marriage. According to Roger's family, Ricky Cowden was a good friend of both Floyd's and Roger's. He was an alcoholic who, at the time of the 1993 reinvestigation, was sitting in the Buchanan County Jail awaiting sentencing for his 6th conviction for DUI. Ricky said he'd known Floyd since they were kids and they were drinking buddies before Floyd had quit drinking sometime in the 80s. It was through Floyd that Ricky met Roger when they were both employed at Beacon's Transport in St. Joseph, Missouri. He considered himself very close friends with both Roger and Marcella. He considered Marcella to be like a sister to him, he said. Ricky was Roger's best man at his wedding. He described Roger as a very nice guy who went to church regularly and caused no problems for anyone. He did not drink, swear, or use drugs. Yet Roger had told Ricky that he was seeing someone on the side. Ricky did not know who she was until after the murders. Ricky told investigators that he felt like the killer or killers was associated with Rose rather than Roger, because Roger had no enemies and was a nice guy. Here is Marcella.
I grew up with Rick Cowden and his brother, Jack, and we were together a lot because our parents were good friends. So there was a lot of visiting in each other's home. I looked upon Rick as a brother figure, of a brother that I didn't ever have, not so much Jackie as I did Rick, because Rick was my age. The story goes that, well, I was supposed to be due in June and Rick was supposed to be due in May. And my mom had me in May and Hazel didn't have Rick till June. So they exchanged back their maternity clothes. So it was that kind of closeness when we were younger. So Rick was just like always a brother figure to me. So he may have had a protective instinct to protect me if anyone was hurting me or harming me. He had called me in the past when he was drunk and said he cared a lot for me and even said that he loved me. And I said, "Oh, Rick, you're like a brother. What are you talking about? We grew up together. You're a brother, you're like a brother to me." So I don't know. He also shared with me that one day Roger had said to him, and I don't think it was too long before he was killed, that he started to talk to him about Rose and that he was running around on me and things like that. And Rick just shut him down and said, "I don't want to hear it." And that came from Rick. So maybe he had a brotherly instinct to protect me.
Ricky recalled that his phone rang in the middle of the night on the night of September 13th to 14th. It was Floyd calling him to inform him that Roger had been found killed. He stated that he believed Floyd told him that Roger had been chopped up and he wanted him to go to Iowa to help him identify the victim. Ricky refused because, and we are quoting from the DCI's interview notes here, quote, he envisioned that the victim's head had been chopped off and the body mutilated. Ricky's girlfriend at the time, Debbie Vaughn, was with him on Saturday night when he received this phone call. She told investigators that Nellie Hatcher told her one time that she believed that Roger got what he deserved for running around on her daughter Marcella. Ricky's ex-wife, Cheryl Fountain, who you may recall was very good friends with Marcella, told police some interesting things about her ex. They had divorced partially because he cheated on her and got another woman pregnant. Also, he was an alcoholic. He had been committed for a short time at the St. Joseph State Hospital for his drinking problem and suicidal tendencies. She had personally telephoned the police and had him committed involuntarily in 1978 or 1979. She said that Nellie Hatcher, who was Ricky's step-aunt, had eventually been forced to terminate Ricky's employment at Beacons because of his excessive drinking. But Cheryl did not believe that Ricky murdered Roger. First of all, she said, he had no motive. She also did not feel that he was capable of such an act. Further, she advised that her ex-husband drank all the time. When drinking, he had a tendency to talk all the time and would have admitted this crime to others. In other words, he had a big mouth. Just as he told the police that he suspected Ricky, Floyd had apparently told multiple other people that he believed Ricky might have been involved. He told his one-time girlfriend, Beth Banks, more than once that he thought Ricky killed Roger and Rose. Beth said that on one occasion, Floyd told her that he thought Ricky had stolen his machete and gone up to Iowa and murdered Rose and Roger. He also told another girlfriend, Sharon Lohmeyer, that he suspected Ricky of the murder. Even though Floyd was the one who threw Ricky's name into the mix, when pressed by investigators as to why he believed Ricky was involved, Floyd backed off these statements. When asked why he suspected Ricky, he advised that there was no reason. He then informed these officers that he did not consider Ricky capable of murder, stating that he was a very nice guy, unless he was drinking. He stated that Ricky had threatened to kill him in the past, but this was just the drink talking. Floyd did not take him seriously. So is it possible that Ricky Cowden killed Roger and Rose? The short story is, Ricky did not really have an alibi for the night of September 12th. When asked as to his whereabouts on the weekend of the murders, he stated he was working in the St. Joseph area going through a divorce, and he didn't really recall everything that he did and everywhere that he went. Nellie Hatcher confirmed through trucking records that Ricky had been at work in the St. Joseph area that weekend. All her records proved was that Ricky worked from approximately 7:20 a.m. until 12:45 p.m. on September 12, 1980, and again from 8 a.m. until 12:12 p.m. on September 13, 1980. There was ample time for him to get up to the Amanas, kill Roger and Rose, and get back in time for his Saturday shift. But Nellie told investigators that as she saw it, there was no reason for Ricky to kill his close friend, Roger. Ricky voluntarily submitted to questioning and fingerprinting. It does not appear that anything came out of this angle of the investigation. Ricky Cowden died in the summer of 2020. Here is Marcella.
They think he died. It's just really an odd situation. They went in, and I don't know how they knew to go in if somebody went in and found him or if they tried to get a hold of him. And I don't know, but he'd been dead for quite a while. As a matter of fact, his son describes it that his body turned to jelly. It was so decomposed, and been looking to see what he's saying about his dad's death. And he said that the body that they got off of the sofa, what they could scrape up off the sofa, had 10 toes, and Rick did not have 10 toes. He lost one or two. He was an alcoholic, and he lived on the streets for quite a while. And it was during the winter time, one of the times that he lived on the streets, and he lost two of his toes from being frostbitten. And so the son's saying that this body had 10 toes. Well, that couldn't be Rick. So if that isn't Rick, whose body was on his sofa in his apartment, and where's Rick? They were looking for a homeless woman that had stayed with him, and I don't know if they had located her, but it's just really a weird situation. I do suspect that Rick may have had something to do with it, if my dad did, but Rick called me, and he was obviously drunk, and he started to say something about Roger's murder, and then we got disconnected, and I think he hung up. I think he got to thinking, maybe what he was saying. And so I've always regretted, wished he'd have finished his statement, what he was going to say about that. And I tried to get him to meet me at not far from his apartment when, it's been about a year ago, I think it was now, tried to get him to meet me and see if he wouldn't talk about Roger's murder and see if he knew something, but he wouldn't meet me.
Ricky concludes our discussion of people who were looked at in this 1993 re-examination of the murders. Investigators acknowledge that their efforts were not fruitful. A February 4th, 1993 article in the St. Joseph News Press states, quote, Iowa County Sheriff James Slockett said the latest investigation didn't reveal any new major developments. Now let's talk about someone who did not know Roger or Rose, but who was a suspect in the eyes of the media. There were many rumors about the young bartender at the Village Pump Lounge who was on duty the night of September 12, 1980. These weren't even just rumors. Information was reported in the newspapers about this bartender that, as we shall see, were not entirely accurate and were inflammatory. For example, a March 15, 1992 article by Rick Smith included the following supposed facts about this bartender, who was not named in the article, but who is identified in the police files as Ron H. The article says that the bartender at the Holiday Inn had been living in his pickup truck in the hotel parking lot, ensuring a short commute to his job behind the hotel bar. The day after the murders, this man disappeared, foregoing a paycheck that he was owed. His truck was later found abandoned in Iowa City. It was later determined that he had gone to North Carolina and joined the Army. By the time investigators tracked him down, he had already been relocated to Germany. Only when he returned to the States after 3 years did investigators interview him. He was administered 9 polygraph exams, which were inconclusive before he finally passed one. The article also touches on rumors that swirled around the case that Rose had been seen in the hotel bar that night, and that she had some kind of heated exchange with the bartender. We could not find any mention of this whatsoever in the police files about the case, but Margie Lowry told us that she heard the bartender story in those first few weeks, possibly even from detectives on the case. As we heard from Margie in an earlier episode, she had been told by investigators that they were following up on reports that Rose had gone down to the bar and asked the bartender to intervene with a guy who was bothering her. It seems a little strange that Rose would end up in the hotel lounge alone, listening to the band. After all, she and Roger were supposed to be on a romantic weekend getaway. And according to Rose's family, she wasn't a big drinker. But the part about the bartender leaving that night and running off to the army, which would come across as very suspicious, if true, appeared not to be correct. Let's take a look at this bartender, Ron H., and see if we can get to the bottom of what is true and what is not. A 1983 interview with Ron H. is very in-depth. DCI Special Agent Michael Marlin questioned Ron extensively about his employment history, his personal life, and his sexual proclivities. It's not reflected in the file why DCI had this renewed interest in the young bartender. Perhaps it was because in 1980, Ron had been somewhat transient, hopping from job to job and crash pad to crash pad without notifying anyone, and they felt that this was suspicious. Perhaps it was because he had a record of having passed some bad checks. Perhaps it was because at the time of the murders, he was having an affair with a married woman, Kathy, who also worked at the Holiday Inn as a desk clerk and helped him to secure a job there. But it was probably because he had just started working at the Holiday Inn on September 9th, and 3 days later, 2 guests were brutally murdered. And on the night of the murders, Ron's lover, Kathy, the desk clerk, actually stayed over in a room at the Holiday Inn and told police that Ron had visited her in that room. The timing is definitely intriguing. The way it might appear to police, the sketchy, transient bartender was having a liaison in the hotel that night, and perhaps, somehow, he had gotten a key, and that this was connected to what happened to Roger and Rose. Under questioning, Ron admitted that he was indeed living in his pickup truck in the hotel parking lot at the time of the murders. He was not supposed to do this, but he did it anyway, parking his truck in the back of the hotel and cleaning up in the hotel lobby bathroom as best he could. He said he probably only took 1 or 2 showers during this time period at his married girlfriend Kathy's house while her husband was at work. He washed his clothes at a public laundromat at the Best Western. He lived in his truck for 3 weeks and then stayed with a friend after the hotel manager found out and shut this down. Contrary to all the rumors, Ron did not skip town the day after the murders. In fact, he did not leave until mid-October, leaving town on the 17th and enlisting in the Army on October 18th. He did admit that he had left a paycheck on the table when he departed. He abruptly decided to make a change, partially because his relationship with married woman Kathy was on the rocks, and left town to join the Army, cutting ties to the Williamsburg area. Shockingly, Ron H. said in his 1983 interview that he was never interviewed officially again after the first day after the murders, when the entire hotel staff was required to speak with the sheriff and DCI agents to look at photos of the victims. We do not know why it was decided to question him much more extensively 3 years later. The case file says, quote, "This particular trip to Fort Carson, Colorado, was done for the purpose of following up in more specific detail with respect to an interview of Ronald H., considered a suspect in the case and for possible elimination purposes." It also makes reference to this being a re-interview. Ron confirmed that at the time of the murders, he and the rest of the staff had been shown photos of the victims. He had never seen them before. Ron said that rather than formally interviewing him, the sheriff would come in and sit at the bar while he was working and ask questions that led Ron to believe that the sheriff didn't like him and was eyeing him for the crime. He queried about Ron and Kathy's relationship and said he'd like Ron to submit to a polygraph, but he never followed through on it. Had he done so, Ron said he would have agreed, quote, anything to get this guy off my back. Detectives pulled his Army personnel records and determined that Ron had an exemplary record, tested at a high level, and had obtained a rank of E5 with top-secret clearance. Now, Sergeant Ron H. was tracked down and re-interviewed while stationed at Fort Carson, Colorado. Ron told detectives on September 12, 1980, he was on duty at the Holiday Inn bar on the night Rose and Roger were killed. He learned of the murder the next afternoon from his girlfriend, Kathy, the hotel desk clerk who had gotten him the job at the hotel a few days before. He did not recognize photos of Rose and Roger, and he could not recall them being in the bar the night they died. Further, he never had a hotel pass key and had never been inside room 260. He admitted that it was possible that he had been to Kathy's room that night to change clothes or shower, but he had not stayed with her. Her husband and kids had joined her for the night at the Holiday Inn. Ron told detectives that the hotel was very busy the night of September 12th, and the staff was all running around accommodating guests. That night, he got off duty very late, around 12:30, and chatted with a kitchen worker in the parking lot in front of the hotel before crashing for the night in the cab of his truck. He also worked on the morning of the 13th in the restaurant. When the hotel staff found out about the murders on that Saturday, they had all compared notes to see if anyone had taken room service up to room 260. Ron himself had not. He had delivered champagne to another room, but not that one. Ron said he felt really bad about the murders. It was a grisly thing to happen, and he also recognized right away that his living in his pickup truck and being brand new to the job was not going to look very good. He also said that the murders were all anyone at work was talking about the next day. Ron told agents that he had never owned a hatchet. He may have had a kitchen knife in his truck, but did not own any hunting or other recreational knives. He may have bounced a few checks in his life, but it was accidental, and he always made it right. Investigators tried to intimidate him into admitting something by asking him if his fingerprints were found on the door to room 260, why that would be. Now, we believe this to have been a bit of disingenuous manipulation on the part of the police in order to put the heat on Ron and make him talk. Ron's fingerprints were not found on the door to room 260. Here is the dialogue that took place. Investigator, is there anything that you wish to add before we terminate this? Ron H. Just that I wish I could remember more to help get this investigation going. I just can't believe that my fingerprints were on that door to that room. Investigator, I didn't say they were. Ron H. Oh. Investigator, I said if. Ron H. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Ron H. Oh, yeah, oh good, okay. Investigator, no, I didn't say they were. If they were, could you say why they were? Ron H. Oh, okay, well, no, if they were, I have no idea why they were. Investigators put Ron through the ringer in this 1983 interview, and the angle of the questioning gives us a glimpse into an investigative avenue being considered by the authorities. It seems that they believed there to be some sexual component to Rose and Roger's murders. They questioned Ron about some awkward stuff regarding his sex life with Kathy. One of those questions was, in the sack, who played the biggest role? Who was the leader? Was it you or her? At this point, Ron asked, what does this have to do with the investigation? The answer, it has some basis for the homicide we are looking at. Then Ron was asked about kinkiness in his relationship with Kathy. Ron responded that they didn't really get kinky. So what was going on here? What we could glean from the file, which has hundreds of pages missing and requires quite a bit of inference and extrapolation, is that, as we mentioned, investigators suspected that Rose and Roger may have been part of a swingers group. If they had evidence that a bartender and a married hotel clerk at the hotel were into kinky stuff, then it might explain what Rose and Roger were doing at that hotel and provide clues as to who killed them. Plus, you may recall that the autopsy found that there was some indication that Rose had engaged in anal sex. And the DCI agent specifically asked Ron whether he liked Greek, which is a reference to anal sex. They asked him about different sexual positions, preferences, whether Ron or Kathy had any homosexual or menage histories, and so on. Clearly, they were interested in whether Rose and Roger's seemingly unconventional sex life could lead to their murderer. Investigators also asked Ron about what types of books he liked to read. Somehow detectives had gotten wind that he had read The Shining and other what they called murder books. Ron sat for a polygraph on August 9, 1983. This consisted of 9 mini polygraphs, not 9 separate exams, as implied by the Gazette article. These were the questions that were asked and Ron's responses. In 1980, at the Holiday Inn, do you know for sure who killed either of those 2 people? Answer, no. At the Holiday Inn, did you personally have any involvement in the death of those 2 people? Answer, no. At the Holiday Inn, at the time those 2 people were killed, did you have a pass key in your possession? Answer, no. On the night those 2 people were killed, were you inside room 260, even if for just a few minutes? Answer, no. Ron was also asked a series of questions that was designed to determine whether he had any knowledge of what item in room 260 had been written on. The questions were all a variation of, do you know if the item written on was the, and then a piece of furniture or other surface filled in, including, in one of the questions, the correct answer, the bathroom door. He answered no to all of these. The polygraph report concludes with the following summary, quote, "It is this examiner's opinion that the subject had no personal knowledge or involvement in this case. There is no reflection in the files whatsoever of the alleged multiple inconclusive polygraphs administered to Ron H., referenced in the media." One thing that we have to mention with regard to Ron H. and why he was so intriguing to investigators was because there was another unsolved murder in an area that he had worked in previously. This was the murder of Michelle Martinko. On December 19, 1979, 18-year-old Michelle Martinko, a high school senior, went to the Westdale Mall in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, to buy a new winter coat her mother had put on layaway. She ran into some friends at the mall around 7 p.m., but she never came home that night. The next morning, Cedar Rapids police officer James Kincaid found her tan Buick sedan parked in the mall lot. Inside, he could see someone slumped on the floor and passenger seat. It was Michelle, and she was dead from 11 stab wounds to the face and upper body. She also had 29 surface cuts and a severe head injury from being bludgeoned with an object. She had lost 1/3 of her blood. The case remained open and unsolved for nearly 4 decades. The killer was believed to have been wearing gloves, as he left no prints, and there was no sexual assault, but there was blood from someone believed to have been the murderer on Michelle's dress and the gear shift of the Buick. Investigators were able to isolate a DNA sample from the killer, but there was no match in CODIS. While the original suspect pool had 80 names on the list, 60 were eliminated, and there was nothing tying the rest to the crime. In 2017, investigators submitted the suspected killer's DNA for genetic genealogical research. It was determined that one of 3 brothers was their killer. After staking out one of them and retrieving a straw he discarded, detectives were able to match Michelle's killer's DNA with that of Jerry Burns, a 65-year-old powder coating company owner in Manchester, Iowa. Detectives collected the straw from Jerry Burns after watching him sip several sodas on October 29th at the Pizza Ranch in Manchester. Interestingly, Burns's wife, Patricia, died by suicide in 2008. His cousin, Brian Burns, vanished December 19, 2013, exactly 34 years after Martinko was killed. Delaware County Sheriff John LeClaire said authorities, quote, don't have any reason to suspect Burns in either case. Jerry Burns was convicted of Michelle's murder in early 2020. It took a jury only 3 hours to find him guilty, despite the fact that there was no evidence he had any connection to Michelle. Only his DNA linked him to her. Burns said he could provide no good explanation for how his DNA got onto Michelle's clothing and gear shift. Michelle's parents were not around to see justice done in their daughter's case. They were both deceased. So, back to Ron H. In 1983, when he was questioned, Michelle's murder was unsolved, and he had been working at a Pier 1 store at the Westgate Mall when she had been killed. Investigators had found a friend of Ron's who told them that he abruptly left the Pier 1 job after Michelle's murder because he felt paranoid that he was being eyed in her case. Ron denied that this ever happened and said that while he had heard about the murder, he was never questioned about it. And as we now know, he did not kill Michelle. It seems that he likely did not kill Roger and Rose either. During the course of the investigation, police also looked into known hotel burglars to try to determine whether any of them could have been responsible. In the course of researching this podcast, we learned that there were a surprising number of seasoned hotel thieves out there. One man investigators came across in the course of their investigation was using the name James John Runnels, but his real name was William Lewis Agelson. Agelson was a habitual hotel burglar who had multiple arrests in California in the 1960s and 1970s for breaking into hotel rooms and stealing occupants' possessions. His take for all his burglaries was easily in the tens of thousands of dollars. In fact, in one run of 7 1975 hotel burglaries alone, he netted over $25,000 worth of jewelry and traveler's checks. By the late 1970s, Agelson was operating in the Midwest, and on October 12, 1982, he was arrested in Kearney, Nebraska, along I-80. The arrest was in relation to a burglary of a Holiday Inn earlier that day. When his car was searched, he was found to be in possession of over 100 hotel keys that he had collected over a 22-year burglary career. These were physical keys that in many cases would open doors to more than one hotel room. His MO was that he and a female accomplice would check in as husband and wife and then check out, keeping the keys and leaving the area only to return to open room doors and steal the contents. Agelson was also found with materials in his vehicle that indicated that he had hit hotels in St. Joseph, Missouri, and Pacific Junction, Iowa. Because of his movements in the Midwest along I-80, and specifically in Iowa and Missouri, and since he was known to use hotel keys to get into rooms, he was thought of as a logical person of interest in the murders of Roger and Rose. Even more suspicious, one of the keys found in his possession was tested at the Amana Holiday Inn, and it actually unlocked the doors to rooms 261, 262, 263, 272, 273, and 238. It was believed that this key would likely also have opened the door to room 260, but the lock had been changed since the murders, so no one could be certain. But there was no indication that Runnels or Agelson, or whatever his name was, had been at the Amana Holiday Inn in September 1980. Manager Tim Trishman checked the registry and determined that he had never stayed there under either name. In an interview with police, Agelson admitted to being a lifelong hotel burglar, but denied that he had ever escalated to murder or that he had any connection at all to what happened in room 260. His prints did not match the one found in room 260, and no employees of the Holiday Inn recognized his photo. He was charged in the hotel burglaries, but that was the extent of the charges. William Agelson died in 2017 in Evansville, Indiana, and was never considered a suspect in the murders. In 1984, 4 years after the murders, investigators believed they were honing in on a suspect or suspects. Sheriff James Slockett, who doggedly headed up the Iowa County investigation for years after he was elected to the post in the fall of 1980, spoke with the St. Joseph News Press. His statements are interesting, although they were possibly intended to spark fear in someone and drive them to confess. He told the paper's reporter, Paul Stewart, "Our investigation is narrowing down. By process of elimination, we have reason to believe that we have narrowed it all down to one or more suspects in your area," referring to St. Joseph. Clearly, the sheriff did not believe that this was a random crime. Of course, the sheriff would not reveal any names. All he would say about the suspects was, it could be more than one, but not more than 3. He would clarify only that whoever he was referring to, they were not in custody. The person or persons he was zeroing in on, quote, has been among the many possible suspects considered during the last 4 years. Slockett told the paper that he was coming for the killer or killers and that he had fire in my eyes. No arrests were made, and the case grew cold. Sheriff Rotter.
There's so many really, really good suspects in this case, and obviously, somebody did this.
But who? This concludes episode 7. Please join us next week as we consider another possibly related hotel murder. If you have any information about the murders of Roger Atkinson and Rose Burkert, please contact the Iowa County Sheriff's Office at 319-642-7307. Scene of the Crime is a production of AbJack Entertainment. It's narrated by me, Jamie Rice, and co-produced by Jessica Betancourt, Gray Hughes, and Mike Morford. It's written by Jessica Betancourt. Special thanks goes out to the family members and friends of Roger Atkinson and Rose Burkert who participated in this podcast. Thanks also goes out to Sheriff Rob Rotter and the Iowa County Sheriff's Department, Paul Holes, Ron Fisher, Tim Trishman, and Ida Block. If you'd like to help Scene of the Crime reach new listeners, be sure to subscribe to the show and leave a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. And please recommend this podcast to your friends. You can find Scene of the Crime on Twitter at Scene of Crime Pod and on Facebook.